October 24th, 1996. In a modest, sterile room at a hospital in New York, an old man in his late 70s is taking his final breaths. The heart monitor beeps slowly, counting down the seconds of a life that most of the world had completely ignored. His name was Hyman Minsky. For more than 50 years, this man was the outcast of the economic world. He was the man nobody wanted to invite to the dinner parties in Washington or the boardrooms on Wall Street. While the titans of finance were popping champagne and celebrating the eternal boom of the 1990s, Minsky was the one man in the corner, shaking his head. He had spent his entire life studying one thing: financial crises. And his conclusion was so simple and so terrifying that the establishment simply refused to listen. His theory didn't rely on complex algorithms or optimistic models of human behavior. It relied on a simple paradox of human nature. He said, "Stability breeds instability." He argued that the safer the world looks, the more dangerous it actually is. He argued that when people feel safe, they take risks. When banks feel safe, they lend to people who can't pay them back. When governments feel safe, they stop regulating. And slowly, silently, the stability itself creates the bomb that eventually blows everything up. But in 1996, nobody cared. The economy was roaring. The dot-com boom was just beginning. Economists were declaring that they had conquered the business cycle, that the era of crashes was over. So Hyman Minsky died in silence. His papers were filed away in dusty university basements, unread, unloved, and ridiculed. But history has a dark, cruel sense of humor, because exactly 12 years after his death, the grave was ripped open. In 2008, the global financial system disintegrated overnight. The great moderation that the experts promised would last forever was exposed as a lie. Banks that had stood for a century collapsed in a weekend. Trillions of dollars of wealth evaporated into thin air. And suddenly, in the smoking ruins of Wall Street, everyone remembered the name of the old man they had ignored. The Wall Street Journal, the very paper that had dismissed him for decades, ran a front-page headline: "In time of tumult, obscure economist gains currency." He had predicted the 2008 crisis with the precision of a sniper, 33 years before a single subprime mortgage was ever sold. He explained exactly how the long period of calm would lead to a period of total chaos. But I'm not telling you this story today to give you a history lesson about 2008. I am telling you this because the ghost of Hyman Minsky has returned. From 2009 to 2025, we have lived through the longest period of artificial stability in human history. The governments of the world looked at the crash of 2008 and decided that they would never let it happen again. They intervened in the markets with a ferocity never seen before. They suppressed interest rates, they printed money, they guaranteed everything. They tell you that unemployment is low. They tell you the stock market is at all-time highs. They tell you that they have engineered a soft landing. But beneath the surface, the rot is spreading. The exact conditions that Minsky warned about, the massive leverage, the blindness to risk, the arrogance of the central planners, are back. But this time, the numbers are not in the billions. They are in the trillions. If Minsky were alive today, looking at the charts of the current economy, he wouldn't scream. He would weep. Because he would know that what comes next isn't just a recession. It is a mathematical inevitability known as the Minsky Moment. And this time, there is no one coming to save us. To understand the magnitude of the lie we are living in, we have to look at the one signal that, historically, was impossible to fake. It is the holy grail of economic warnings, the inverted yield curve. Now stay with me, because this is the mechanism that determines your future. The concept is simple, but the implications are deadly. Imagine you lend your money to the US government. If you lock your money away for 10 years, you expect to get paid more interest than if you lock it away for 3 months. That is the basic law of risk. Time equals money. But sometimes something breaks in the matrix. Sometimes investors become so terrified of the immediate future that they rush to buy long-term bonds for safety, driving the yields down. Suddenly, the 3-month bond pays more than the 10-year bond. This is called an inversion, and for the last 60 years, it has been the economic equivalent of a death sentence. Since 1968, every single time this curve has inverted, a recession has slammed into the American economy within 6 to 18 months. It happened in 1970. It happened in 1980. It happened before the dot-com crash in 2000. It happened in 2007 before the great financial crisis. The track record was 100%, 7 inversions, 7 disasters. It was the indicator that never lied. Fast forward to October 17th, 2022. The curve inverted again. And it didn't just invert a little bit. It inverted deeper than it had since the 1980s. The alarm bells were deafening. Bloomberg Economics published a model stating the probability of a recession in the next year was 100%, not 99, 100. Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, the World Bank, they all braced for impact. The storm was coming. But then something strange happened. The storm didn't make landfall. 2023 passed, The economy grew, 2024 passed, the stock market hit record highs. We are now deep into 2025. The recession that was guaranteed never showed up. The Federal Reserve took a victory lap. They coined the term soft landing. They claimed they had done the impossible. They cooled inflation without breaking the economy. But this is where the truth gets buried. The yield curve didn't lie. The signal wasn't broken. The signal was suppressed. You see, in a normal world, when a patient gets sick, the doctor prescribes rest. But in the modern economy, the doctors, the central bankers, decided that the patient is not allowed to sleep. They didn't cure the disease. They just injected the patient with enough morphine to kill a horse and propped him up in the window to make him look alive. To understand why the crash hasn't happened yet, you have to understand the regime change that happened after 2008. Before that year, if the economy slowed down, the Fed would lower interest rates by a few points. It was like taking an aspirin. But after the near-death experience of the global financial crisis, the playbook changed. They stopped using medicine and started using magic. They call it quantitative easing. It is a polite technical term for printing trillions of dollars out of thin air to buy bad debts. When the pandemic hit in 2020, they went all in. In a single year, the government spent 15% of their GDP on stimulus. They sent checks to people to stay home. They bailed out airlines. They bought corporate bonds. They flooded the system with so much liquidity that a recession was literally impossible. You could not have a recession when you're force-feeding money into the bank accounts of every corporation in America. But economists like Kenneth Rogoff of Harvard and the ghost of the Austrian school know the truth. We didn't avoid the recession. We postponed it. Imagine a forest fire. Small fires are natural. They burn away the dead wood, the dry leaves, and the rot, allowing new trees to grow. This is what a recession does. It clears out bad companies and bad investments. It resets the system. But the Federal Reserve has become a firefighter that puts out every single match. They refuse to let even the smallest fire burn. So the dead wood piles up. The dry leaves accumulate. The rot spreads deeper into the forest floor. By preventing the small fires, they have guaranteed that when the fire finally catches, it will burn down the entire forest. And the first casualties of this no-fire policy are already walking among us. They are the undead of the corporate world. Welcome to the era of the zombie company. This isn't a metaphor. Zombie company is a real economic term defined by the Bank for International Settlements. It refers to a company that is at least 10 years old and does not make enough profit to cover the interest payments on its debt. In a capitalist system, a real capitalist system, these companies would die. They would go bankrupt. Their assets would be sold to better companies. Their employees would go to more productive jobs. This is the creative destruction that makes nations rich. But we don't live in capitalism anymore. We live in corporate socialism. Banks today are terrified of letting these companies fail. If a bank admits that a major corporation is bankrupt, the bank has to mark that loan as a loss on its own balance sheet. If they take too many losses, the bank itself looks weak. So they play a game called extend and pretend. They give the zombie a new loan to pay off the old loan. They keep the IV drip running. They keep the corpse warm. In the 1980s, zombies were rare, about 2% of companies. Today, estimates suggest nearly 15% of all companies in the developed world are zombies. 1 in 7 companies you see is dead but doesn't know it yet. Why does this matter to you? Why should you care if a bad company stays alive? Because zombies are parasites. They suck up capital that should go to startups. They hoard workers that should be at growing firms. They lower prices desperately just to get cash, which makes it impossible for healthy companies to compete. We have seen this movie before. Japan, 1990. When their asset bubble burst, the Japanese government refused to let the bad banks and companies fail. They kept the zombies alive. The result was the lost decades. 30 years of zero growth, 30 years of stagnant wages. A generation of young people who never saw a raise, never bought a home, and never saw the future get better. The zombie infection turns a sharp, painful recession into a chronic, decades-long depression. It doesn't kill you instantly. It drains your blood slowly for 30 years. And right now, the United States and Europe are becoming Japan on steroids. While the zombies infect the productivity of the economy, a much larger, darker cloud is forming overhead. The inevitable mathematical end of the artificial stability. The debt. If there is one number that should keep you awake at night, it is this: 235%. Global debt has now reached 235% of global GDP. The world owes more than double what it produces. We have borrowed prosperity from the future, and the bill is coming due. In the United States, the situation is becoming terminal. The U.S. national debt chart has gone vertical. But the debt amount isn't the problem, the interest is. Because the Fed raised rates to fight inflation, the cost of servicing that debt has exploded. America now pays over $1 trillion a year just in interest. Let that sink in. $1 trillion. That is more than the entire defense budget, more than Medicare. Every dollar you pay in taxes is no longer building bridges or schools. It is being transferred directly to the bondholders, the banks, the sovereign wealth funds, the elite, just to keep the lights on. This leads to a nightmare scenario called fiscal dominance. It means the central bank is no longer in charge. The Fed cannot raise interest rates to fight inflation, because if they do, the interest payments will bankrupt the US government. They are trapped. And when a government is trapped between default and inflation, they choose inflation. Every single time. They will print the money to pay the debt. They will devalue your currency to save their system. And this devaluation brings us to the final and most cruel consequence of the stability lie. The reason why you feel poor, even though the news tells you the economy is booming. For the last 15 years, money was free, interest rates were zero. But free money doesn't flow to the poor. It doesn't flow to the middle class. It flows to those who own assets. When the Fed printed trillions, that money didn't go into your paycheck. It went into the stock market. It went into real estate. It created the everything bubble. Look at the Shiller PE ratio. It measures how expensive stocks are compared to reality. The historical average is 16. In 1929, right before the Great Depression, it hit 32. In 2000, before the dot-com crash, it hit 44. Today, we are hovering near 40. We are standing on a ledge twice as high as the one that triggered the Great Depression. The stock market is priced for perfection in a world that is fundamentally broken. But the stock market is just a casino. The real tragedy is housing. Historically, a house cost about 5 times the average annual salary. That was the American dream. Today, in major cities, it is 12 times. In London, it is 20 times. Why? Because when money is cheap, investors borrow billions to buy homes, turning shelter into a speculative asset. They have turned the housing market into a club that you are not invited to. This is why the world feels so angry. The stability they brag about comes at a cost. The cost was the destruction of the middle class. By pumping up asset prices to save the banks, they widened wealth inequality to levels not seen since the French Revolution. The populism, the riots, the extreme politics, these are not random events. These are the symptoms of an economic system that sacrificed the people to save the Ponzi scheme. Which brings us back to Hyman Minsky and his final terrifying prediction. Minsky didn't just say stability breeds instability. He described exactly how it ends. He called it the Minsky Moment. It happens when the debt becomes so massive that the income from the assets can no longer pay the interest. At that moment, the Ponzi borrowers, as he called them, are forced to sell their assets just to pay the bills. Selling drives prices down. Lower prices force more selling. Panic sets in. The liquidity evaporates. It is a sudden, violent collapse of asset values. It happened in 1929. It happened in 2008. And the math guarantees it will happen again. We are currently living in the euphoria phase. The phase where everyone believes this time is different. The phase where they believe the government can print its way out of anything. But you cannot print productivity. You cannot print demographics. You cannot print truth. The soft landing is a myth. The recession of 2023 wasn't avoided. It was stored up. We have compressed a decade of natural economic correction into a pressurized container. And when the seal finally breaks, whether it's in 2026, 2027, or next week, the explosion will not look like a normal recession. It will look like a reset. The zombie companies will mass liquidate. The real estate market will freeze. The bond market will revolt against the government's debt. Hyman Minsky died ignored by the establishment, but he left us the map. The stability is fake. The debt is real. And the reckoning is mathematically inevitable. The question you need to ask yourself is not, will the crash happen? The question is, when the artificial support is finally pulled and the laws of gravity return, where will you be standing? History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And right now, the music is about to stop.